Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today I'm doing a Q&A for the Wings of Romulus episode, the Kithomer Massacre. So those of you who left your questions under the pinned comment, here's where I'll answer them. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So the first question comes from Jonathan McFarland, and actually there were a couple other people in the comments more broadly who were asking a very similar question, and that was, why didn't the Klingons go to war with the Romulans after this? So to put it simply, this is quite a big topic. To put it simply, and again, I didn't really have time to cover it in the video. They couldn't. They really were not in a position to do so. You've got to think, the Romulans at this point have got Vammalax and Danios and Ravens. The best the Klingons have is Camarag. So there's a big tech gap. This is really where you can say that the tech gap between the Klingons and everyone else kind of took place. So, yes, the Klingons had Camarag, and they had variants of the bird of prey that they were playing with. They obviously had the Cavort. They also experimented with heavy birds of prey. They also experimented with long-range variants of the bird of prey. They were doing a lot with the bird of prey platform and playing with that, which was useful. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't going to help them fight a war against a modern Romulan fleet. The Klingons were really, at this point in history, making do with what they had. And what they had was not much, was Camarag's birds of prey and Katingas, which was just not going to be up to the standard of, these next generation Vamalak and Danios class warbirds. It just wasn't going to be up to scratch. So that was why the Klingons certainly didn't respond initially. Now, there was a Klingon response, in as much as so Km'pec is in office at this point, and there's basically two proposals. There's two Starship design proposals. Bear in mind, in this period, the Klingon Empire is operating on very limited funding. He only has so much money to splash around, and he needs to put it on the right idea. And there's two basic proposals going around. There's one, which is an interceptor-type craft that is going to be fast and modern, up-to-date, and very, very capable of moving very quickly to intercept and repel Romulan raiders. Now that's important. Repel, not destroy. It's not going to have overwhelming amounts of firepower, but it's going to have enough to hopefully scare off most Romulan ships. Now the other proposal, albeit more expensive one, was to build a long-range battle cruiser that could go into Romulan space and perform retaliatory raids. Km'pec reasoned that if they went ahead with that project, then the Romulans would have even more reason to attack them because of they're now worried that the Klingons are going to retaliate, so they want to disable the Klingons as much as possible. He figured that going with the interceptor program, it would just make it not worth the Romulans' time to continue raiding. So that's what he did. He went with the interceptor program, and that gave birth to the Boreth class. Now, the long-range battlecruiser did continue going through design. There were a lot of houses that were interested in developing this idea, particularly more belligerent houses, and particularly the older, wealthier houses, who were also prouder as well. So the design did get developed, and then under Gowron, when the Klingon Empire is, becoming much more self-confident and assertive, then he gives the necessary permissions and funding for it to be built, and that is built as the B-12, which is, good-sized battleship, light battleship, I suppose you could call it. Obviously, it's not as up-to-date and as powerful as the Negvar, but it's a good supplement to Klingon forces and has a good amount of long-range capability. A lot of the work that went into that ongoing B-12 project would then be put to use in building the Negvar. And, by that point, I'm pretty sure Romulan raids decreased significantly. So yeah, that was effectively the Klingon response to the Kithomer Massacre, at least in the immediate aftermath, is like, let's not retaliate, let's just make it so difficult for them to do anything like that again. And obviously other things like improving security protocols, trying to tighten up on discipline and newer, more advanced sensor grids and defense networks, But these are all things that are very expensive. The big thing was creating a ship that could go out there and be very fast and very responsive and make it very difficult for the Romulans to raid with impunity. Okay, next question comes from Stephen Ross. When Picard encountered the Romulans, they mentioned dealing with a problem on the far side of their territory. I have to wonder what was so much trouble that they ignored the Federation and finishing off the Klingons. So, there's a couple of things. One, I don't think they actually ever meant to, quote-unquote, finish off the Klingons. I'll cover this in a video on the Romulan doctrine in this period, but their goal was never to conquer or destroy the Klingons. It was more to weaken them and degrade them. Now, as to what was going on the other side of Romulan space, well, I don't know. It's one of those things that, doesn't tell us. On one level, it can be, some people have implied it to be the Borg, but that doesn't make much sense. Then why would they not know about the Borg when they destroy their neutral zone bases? So I don't think it's the Borg. What it could be, it could be anything. If you want to pull from beta canon, you could pull stuff like Andromedans, Hydrons. Hydrons are a bit earlier. Andromedans are sort of a timeless threat. You could have Andromedans show up at any point in the timeline and, cause problems for the Empire. So, it's up to you. We honestly don't know what it was, but I would guess they definitely were involved in expansion. I suppose it's worth bearing in mind they underwent a lot of technological advancement between 2260 and 2360. And that was probably a technological advantage they didn't have before. And so suddenly a whole load of targets which perhaps weren't very viable before did become viable targets because of their technological advancement. Because, they had gone from using ships like the Talis and Thry to, within 100 years, using stuff like the Vamalak, Danios, and Duridex. Which were just considerable step-ups and offered them so many more ways to go about defeating and degrading enemy governments in ways that didn't necessarily entail all-out war. All-out war is expensive, so the Romulans learned to operate on a low level and defeat their enemies over a protracted period of time. So that's probably another reason for the length of the absence, is because a lot of these projects that were going on in terms of expanding the Empire took time because they weren't doing it in these rapid wars as perhaps the Klingons might. The Klingons would do it in these rapid conquests that happened within a year or two, and the Romulans may well have been playing these conquests out over a couple decades just so they could minimize the amount of force they actually needed to exert. Again, I'll cover this in Romulan doctrine. Okay, next question from XX Akula XX Strikes is, when will we get a completion to the Dominion War? I'm looking forward to seeing what happened when the Breen got into the war. That's going to basically be the next thing. So my current content plans for that, roughly, is going to be Battle of Beta Z. That finishes off the arc of the Calandra offensive, well and truly. Then we'll be looking, at the Battle of Septimus III, the Battle of Earth, or the Attack on Earth, and a few other battles that I won't spoil here because I've got them planned, and those will become clear as you see the campaign play out over the coming months. Okay, next question is from Tully DT. This is an interesting one. Given the dire straits the Klingons found themselves in, what stopped them from going full Cardassia and running their vassal planets like Bajor? Or, taking the opposite position, what stopped them from relaxing restrictions and allowing their vassal states to make some military contributions to shore up the Empire's defense? Right, well, this is an interesting issue, and it's an issue that a lot of actual real-world empires have found themselves in. So in terms of what stopped them from going full Bajor on their vassal states, the main thing was the Federation. So, as mentioned in the episode, Essentially, what the first Kithomer Accords did is open up basic level trade between the two powers. Now, the second Kithomer Accords, which came after the Kithomer Massacre, at that point it became very, very clear that the Romulans and Klingons were no longer buddy-buddy, and that gave the Federation the opportunity to move in and become the main ally of the Klingons. In that treaty, the Federation promised to, give them things like industrial replicators and other various technologies. Obviously, when you're in bed with the Federation, there are certain stipulations, and one of those is, no crimes against humanity sort of thing, no genociding people, no slave labor camps, at least not obviously, not any that the cameras can see. I will point out that Klingon prisons still had a very bad reputation during the 24th century, and it was a very regular and consistent tactic for Starfleet officers to threaten prisoners with being handed over to the Klingons. That was a very common practice, so it's like, yeah, they probably knew that it wasn't all, sunshine and rainbows in Klingon space. But at the very least, they were, they told you can't just, strip mine your occupied planets. Here's some industrial replicators. Please don't do that. So that's one area. And then the other area, of course, is in the restrictions around vassal races. I mean, that was it partially depended on what your vassal race was and what sort of grade. The Klingons had a hierarchy of vassal races. Generally, the harder you were to defeat back in the day, or the more militarily competent you were before the Klingons arrived, the higher up on the hierarchy you would be. So, in terms of augmenting their regular forces, not so much. They wouldn't integrate them into regular forces. What would become a more common practice is making use of mercenaries, particularly races that had a history of mercenaries. So Orions, Kzinti. These are all races that have a history of being sort of semi-self-sufficient and operating on their own, and taking money where they can. So that was a much easier thing to do, and there were plenty of Kzinti and Orion privateers already operating in Klingon space, so it wouldn't take much for them to then get a little bit extra to maybe guard this shipping lane, stuff like that, little stuff. That was really the level it was until the Dominion War, and until we know that there was uprisings on Krios, and it is quite possible that basically these were kind of to do with a negotiation of, okay, Kriosians will serve in the Klingon military now. That's quite possible. And then the Kriosians would have said, we want more of a say in how our planet's governed. That's quite possible. Possibly that's what actually happened. The Klingons, maybe in a panic after Kithomer, began raising these Kriosian regiments. And then, 20 years down the line, whenever that episode is, TNG The Mind's Eye, 20 years later, then those regiments break away back on their planets, or, mutiny, and then say, well, okay, we'll serve the Klingon Empire, but we want, better treatment or whatever. Or, we've spilled our blood for the Klingon Empire. This blood should pay for our freedom. And again, that's happened to many empires. The vassal states actually are very proactive, often in sending people for military service, because it then makes an argument for independence. One of the things, to say that, we are a nation with an identity and we can defend ourselves, and we are willing to, fight for it. If not directly, then indirectly in that instance. Certainly it was something the British benefited from greatly in the two world wars. Okay, next questions are from Josh K. And this kind of goes, the first question is actually what I already covered as to why the Romulans went quiet. But the second question is still interesting. So what was the Federation's response? Were they worried that the Romulans were going to do the same to one of their planets? Well, no. Because the consequences of the Romulans doing that to a Federation planet had already been very clearly delineated during the Tomed incident. There may have been a concern in terms of the Romulans' ability to conduct strikes deep into Federation space, but also this is the Golden Age, and the Federation know that they are far more technologically advanced than the Klingons, so they were perhaps quite tempted to think that, well, we can detect them, it's fine, we're way more advanced, our sensors are way better, our systems are way better, we'll detect the Romulans, no problem. So, that's a possibility as to why the Federation didn't seem to take much heed, is because they thought, well, we're fine. The other thing is, of course, the Treaty of Algernon, and the Romulans attacking the Federation would break the Treaty of Algernon, which means Federation ships with cloaking devices, which means tricobalt warheads, which means, we play out the Tomed incident all over again. So that's their main defense, is that they know, and that's also why the Federation is so confident in dealing with the Romulans in the Next Generation. They know that if the Romulans break the treaty or break the peace, then they are allowed then to do all the things that the Romulans really don't want them to do. So that's really the main reason that the Federation didn't respond. Now, they would also, again, take this as an opportunity to become closer allies with the Klingon Empire and really turn the Quadrant against the Romulans, make them feel surrounded. Although that was a very, very slow, very grinding process, which really didn't... The Romulans really weren't that worried about it until Gowron became Chancellor. Km'pec, it's like, okay, he's Federation sympathetic, but also he's got enough people in his High Council that are on our side that are going to just make him incapable of action. But then this firebrand Gowron comes in, and, this guy's crazy. I mean, look at his eyes. You see his eyes. This guy's crazy. This guy's nuts. And, it's like, okay, well, now we do actually have to take more direct action to try and alienate the two powers, because here's this new guy, we don't know what he's going to do, and he may well be very Federation sympathetic, and may well really turn the screw on us. So, yeah. Next question is from Tom Zaros, 48. Great video. Did you get some inspiration from the Harkonnen attack on Arrakeen from Dune by any chance? Yes. I mean, the more observant of you will notice that the two trailers were also very heavily inspired by both Dune film adaptations. And actually, there's a combination of. So the Praetor's plan is kind of inspired, sort of a little bit, by the David Lynch adaptation, although it's far less over the top and weird and gross. The main inspiration actually for that is from the 2000 adaptation. It was the miniseries, and that's with the Baron Harkonnen being played by Ian McNeice, who I just love, and he's amazing in that role. It's so much fun to watch him. And so, yeah, that's the main inspiration for that. And then, of course, the Nightblades trailer with the Colonel visiting the Remans, or specifically the Reman warriors. That's very obviously inspired by the Sardaukar introductory scene in Denis Villeneuve's Dune, which was like, you had the whole film, which everyone really liked, and then you had a whole subset, I think probably a lot of people who were into 40k and stuff like that, who then saw that Sardaukar scene and were like, oh yeah, this is what we want in our sci-fi film. Yeah, weird religious fanatic warriors being anointed with blood and a creepy throat singer. That's what we want. So yeah, there was a lot of inspiration from Dune. I think using Dune as inspiration really works when you're doing stories about the Klingons and other similar things, or doing Game of Thrones or Vikings or whatever story you want to take. But, those kind of stories work very well with the Klingons for obvious reasons. I mean, yes, there's a lot of DNA connected to Dune, but also equally, Dune was taking a lot of inspiration from the past. So there's also stuff like the Glencoe Massacre. There's, of course, what's put the murder of the king in Macbeth. The point being, those kind of things of you invite someone into your house and then they betray you is a very, very common trope. I also really liked so I released the episode on Thanksgiving evening for those of you in the US, which I just thought was a touch of brilliance. It was accidental. I didn't time it for that, but I just thought that's a touch of brilliance. Because what will you all have done? You will have all either gone around your relatives or had relatives around, and you've all been fed up on your Thanksgiving turkey, and you're all feeling nice and content with the world. And then the last thing you watch before bed, around about 7ish or whatever, is my video, and it's basically say, don't invite guests around your house. They'll betray you. They'll lower your house shield. Check the shield. The Romulans are coming. I just found that quite amusing. I'd be interested to know if, people were a little bit paranoid after that. Anyway, next question from Jonathan McFarland. What is the Klingon ship at the 450 mark? That is the Klingon D10 class assault cruiser. So it's a ship, effectively from the TOS era, but it extends well into the motion picture era. We'll see use in the Dominion War era. It's been featured in a couple episodes of the Dominion War as well. So it's basically, you can see what it is. It's a bulked out Ktinga, and it is used basically as an assault carrier. And it's one of my go-to uses it's one of my go-to pictures for showing the Klingons in that era. Final question from John Derrico. Wasn't the Enterprise C destroyed at the Battle of Kithomer? No, it was destroyed at the Battle of Narendra 3, which was actually beforehand. There was a whole thing of people getting confused as to when the Battle of Narendra 3 was. I myself, actually, in the process, I'll be honest, in the process of writing it, I got mixed up and put the Kithomer Massacre before Battle of Narendra 3, and then quickly had to retcon that when I was like, oh wait, no, they don't. That's not how it goes. Narendra 3 is actually first. So basically, I put it that Narendra 3 was a dry run. It's like, okay, we've been drilling this, and the Romulans are now like, okay, well, let's see what attacking a Klingon planet is actually like. And the one thing they didn't see coming is that the Federation ship was going to show up and defend it. So that was, you've got to think about it from the Romulan perspective there. It's just like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to see how the Klingons are going to defend themselves, or how the Klingons will react to this attack. Wait, why is there an ambassador class? Guys, why is there an ambassador class here? Whatever, okay, let's give it a crack. And they did, but it was, it put up a good fight, and that's probably another reason that the Romulans didn't actually reveal themselves to the Federation for another 20 years, was because they were actually like, I'd like a little bit more of an advantage. I want something. Our Vamalaks aren't quite big and scary enough. We need something bigger and scarier. So that's all your questions answered from the Kithomer Massacre. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I answered to your satisfaction. I will see you all in the next video. Thank you all for watching. I will now thank my members. My Navarks, David Reeves, Jeffrey Ballard, and Tully DT. My commanders, Miami Jules, Captain's Quarters, Chase Rector, PQSK, Philip Ty, Jeff Hallam, Bird Monster, Mark Philippe, Robert Sampson, Sean Farrell, Guillermo Martinez, Das Blas, Adam Bowman, and Nathaniel Mead. And I salute my Centurions, Pendlebury, BOS Domestic Disputes, Marcus Hall, Paul Lash, Julian Arnott, Freedom Trooper, Okokatum Questo, Squadra Course, and Gabe Logan. And I welcome all my new sub-lieutenants. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.